Great, here we are.
Here
David,
we
how
are.
are you?
I'm fine, Sandra. And how are you?
I'm excited. I'm very good. Thank you very much. I'm so excited we finally managed to find a hole in the schedule to meet and talk today.
Likewise.
I know you've been busy. I know you've been all over the place and promoting your book. Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, you know, I wrote the book not to sell books, but to sell me. And, frankly, nobody cares that I wrote a book. I'm not like Stephen King, right? And nobody's sitting around at the bookstore waiting for my next book to come out. So I have to make them care. And that's the part of book writing that we're doing now. And so I've been approaching universities to take this book to adopt it into their marketing research studies, for example.
Nice.
And basically just extolling the virtues of qualitative research and the job that I do, trying to explain that to people and just how important it is. And many of the products that they've touched and used are likely products that we've worked on prior to them going to the market. So we've been very busy, a lot of podcasts, a lot of blogging, and it's really gained a lot of notoriety. And I think it's just because of the unique application of what I'm doing. So
Yeah.
hopefully, I stumbled upon a good idea.
I do think so. Um, just because of the way you were describing it just now, what was like the most astonishing comment you got about your book so far? Was there something that stood out of you, like a comment that a person gave after reading your book?
Yeah, it was from my old boss, Regis McKenna, who taught me qualitative research. And if I don't know if you know your Silicon Valley lore, but Regis is at a very famous public relations and marketing agency and helped spawn companies like Apple and Intel and Genentech. And he went on to become a very famous guru in technology communications. He endorsed my book and said that I had taken qualitative research to the next dimension. And that was really sweet of him to do that. Uh,
Nice.
so that was the coup de grace for me.
Sounds amazing. Yeah, that leads me to the other question I was really curious about. Was there a key moment for you that kind of made you take this road, not only to writing the book, but kind of taking this road in towards taking this research attempt into, linking it to all the topics that you were interested at the time? Was there a key moment for you that kind of took you to this road?
I think there's several forks in the path that turned me into a qualitative researcher. And for those of your viewers that don't know what a qualitative researcher is, I probably should step back and explain that.
Please.
So there's two types of research, really. There's secondary research and primary research. And secondary research is the research that we all do when we go to the library. It's researching information that already exists in the public domain.
Mhm,
Then there's primary research, okay? And primary research is a practice of studying things that haven't been studied before,
mhm,
okay? And there's two types of primary research. There's qualitative research and quantitative research. Now, most recently, we got a lesson on quantitative research by watching the American elections, right? Those are all statistical uh, prognostications about who will win and who will lose. Though that involves very large numbers of respondents, okay? And it's more about statistical reliability. What I do, on the other hand, is qualitative research, and that's depth of information, and that's face-to-face research talking to people. It's not about statistical reliability. It's really about understanding something very deeply. And that's what I do and have been doing for almost 4 decades now, since at a very young age. Now, prior to that, this is the one fork in the road. Prior to that, my father was rather ambitious and had jobs uh, coast to coast in the US. And so before the age of 12, I had traversed the United States 3 times.
Wow.
Uh, and each time kind of being the new kid on the block. And so to fit in, I just kind of kept my eyes open and my mouth shut. Then I became a journalist, and I didn't really want to stay a journalist. What I really wanted to do was research. And as I begun to start my research career, uh, I noticed that I had a sixth sense about reading people. I could tell when they were pleased and when they weren't. And that turned into a lifelong study, which brought me to fork number two in the road. And that was when I began a really deep dive into training with some of the world's best body language folks, and then beginning to train myself. Now, you asked merging the two. Well, it didn't happen like that at first. Um, what really happened was I had almost a 4-decade-old business, Merrill Research, the research side, and then I had the Merrill Institute for Nonverbal Intelligence. And when I started that in 2016, people that were smarter than me about marketing said, you really should keep these companies separate because we don't want your Merrill Research clients to think you've gone off galloping down the body language path, never to be seen again. So I said, okay, we did that. So we set up 2 companies, 2 websites, accounting structures. It was spaghetti until I began to get feedback, especially from a close acquaintance of mine that was helping me with this. He says, I know we told you to separate these at two, but now I'm thinking, from what I'm hearing from the market, if you were to combine these two, nobody would be doing this.
Hmm.
And that's when we had the aha moment. And the Merrill Institute still exists. I still train people, but most of the wood there is behind the Merrill Research arrow.
Hmm.
So that's really unique. There's nobody doing what I do. There's a billion people on LinkedIn, right? 5 million of them are coaches, roughly.
It's an amazing number. It's really.
It is. And to stand out as yet another coach was something that I didn't think I was up for. It just wasn't me. And so we took this path, and it's been really good ever since. And in between doing this, if you read the forward in my book, you will see that I had 5 spinal surgeries. And so I was able to actually write the book, which was a real challenge after that. Uh, but actually tell my story about my own personal grit and the grit it takes to do this kind of job. So, does that answer your question, Sandra?
Yes, and maybe try to sum it up one more time in short, because the question was, what were the key moments that took you down the road? So one was probably the way you were brought up and how you moved across, the country, and how this influenced your way of approaching others and how they interacted with you and what you got from observing others. And then the step with the companies and, putting things together that other people don't. And your curiosity probably also. I'm guessing there might be an
Well,
intrinsic curiosity.
curiosity is the first chapter of my book.
There you go.
Without that, nothing exists, really, right?
Mm,
And so, I mean, you are where you're studying for a doctorate, right? And you're
yes,
doing that because you're curious, because nobody would put themselves through that
that's true.
unless they were curious. Um,
Stay curious, right? And stay curious. Not
yeah,
only be
you
stay.
never stop learning, right?
Mm,
Especially as everything is changing around us rapidly. So those are good summary points. It was basically growing up and then being kind of thrust into a job where all you do is talk to people all day long, and you begin to notice something. And that's
Yeah.
what spurred me to study.
Yeah. Maybe one question in between, just because again you mentioned it. What are the people that influenced you most, or that you really took the training seriously and to another level? Like, what were the people that influenced you the most in your path?
Some of them I've met, some of them I haven't.
Mhm.
But certainly Joe Navarro comes to mind.
Mm.
He's ex-FBI. I went through his course, and he actually endorsed my book as uh, another use case for body language because he's into it from a business perspective. I was into it from a research perspective. Um, Certainly, Regis McKenna was inspirational. Uh, my former partner, Patrick Merrill, whose name we still retain, he was instrumental. And I mentioned that in the book. I first watched him do groups way, way back. Uh, my my colleague and client, Mark Skillings, who resides in the Boston area, he was very instrumental in helping me navigate this kind of tricky path. So, and of course, my wife, that couldn't have done anything without her.
Yes.
I was in bad shape.
I can see. Yeah, I can see the challenge. I mean, it's really hard to imagine something like this. The efforts that you must have put into the whole thing must have been absolutely incredible. Um, it sounds absolutely amazing. All the people that you mentioned are really unique in their own way, and I can see how this can be really inspiring. And you were talking about the training. So the other question I wanted to ask you is, when we come in with training topics and our schedules and what we think we should train people in, then typically we get surprised by the audience because they're asking us different questions than we probably thought, or they're challenged by things that we didn't even think they might be challenged by, even though we might know the target group or we're really well prepared. But is there something that stands out to you that people typically get challenged by when getting trained by you or your colleagues, that actually is shouldn't be challenging?
I think the number one thing that stumps people is they're still listening to the spoken word,
Hmm.
and they're still giving too much weight to the spoken word. Now, that's not to say that you should automatically discount everything you hear,
Yeah.
but it's all about context, right? And people have a hard time listening, and they have a hard time practicing this. And you got to practice it because body language is just that. It's about the body. And so if you're not standing in front of a mirror before your next presentation, you're not practicing. Okay. If you're not watching TV with the sound off, you're not practicing. I just did that for the recent Zelensky Trump meeting in the White House. And I did it in an apolitical way. Okay. But I watched that episode with the sound off. And let me tell you, the bodies were talking almost as loud as the words.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
So, studying body language is not unlike studying a foreign language. You got to practice it. And the good thing is that if you're speaking French, you're not always up against French people, right? But when you are, you can practice it. But body language is, you're up against everybody. It doesn't really matter what they speak, it just matters what their body says. And there are ways to look at this. Um, and I think people think that it's easier than it is. They think that I walk into a room and pow, I've got somebody figured out. It just doesn't work like that. Nothing could be further from the truth. So that's the number one problem. Um,
And what is a typical I'm going to say mindset or attitude that you're kind of confronted with when you meet a crowd that's probably really critical? Because I would argue that there's either this group of people that's really interested in it, like, and they're like, "Oh, tell me more. I really want to learn it." And the other one is like really skeptical, and everybody in between, of course. But these are the big groups. And what are the typical mindsets that they kind of bring when they're really critical, and why are they critical?
uh, People don't really understand just how long the study of body language has been going on. It's like it's 400 years now, roughly. Okay. And we're going way back in history to the post-French Revolution, to um, the naturalist movement and Darwin, right? Darwin was studying not only human body language, we wrote a lot about the body language of dogs,
Yes.
right? So that's been going on for a long time, but just in the last 60, 70 years, it has really exploded, the social science study of body language. And there's a couple guys out here in the San Francisco Bay Area where I'm at that are pioneers and gurus in body language. One of them is famous, Paul Ekman. He
Yes.
wrote Telling Lies. And the other equally famous guy, David Matsumoto,
Yes.
I believe out of UCSF or USF. These guys are heavyweights in the field, um, and uh, influenced me greatly.
Hmm. And the what is kind of your approach when I'm going to say, when you want to show somebody that it works, like it just works, you just want to give them a practical insight and just, what's your go-to example that you give them?
Wow, that's a good question. There's a series of facial micro expressions that are very quick bursts of emotion. They cannot be controlled consciously.
Hmm.
And here's the scientific part of body language is that what I teach people, the reactions are actually controlled by a part of the brain. And that part of the brain uh, reacts uh, before you speak. So, one of these signs, one of the micro expressions that people will see is a sign of contempt.
Hmm.
And this is what it looks like. I'm going to lean in here, and you're going to see my lip curl up.
Hmm.
It's going to look asymmetrical.
Hmm.
All right. So, I'm going to lean in. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's about that fast.
Hmm.
So, if you go home to your kids are great at this, and you ask them, have you done your homework? And they say, yes. You might want to ask again. Because what that means, it's a sign of contempt, meaning I don't like what it is that you just said, or I feel superior to you. You will see that. And that's pretty much, and there's some other signs like disgust,
Hmm.
the bunny
Yes.
nose. And as soon as I say, go home,
Hmm.
turn the TV off, ask your significant other what they want, how do you feel about hot dogs tonight?
Hmm.
And you don't need to follow up. You see, my wife and I really just have to lob something out and I'll know where she's at. She doesn't really have to tell me much. Now, the converse of that is she's gotten very good at reading me,
Of course.
right? Right. So she probably could be certified. She's in HR,
Yes.
so, which is another area where, body language, I think, would be crucial.
Yeah, definitely. And when you train people and give them the best bits of your research and all the knowledge and expertise that you have, what are they typically really, really curious and really ready to learn? And what do they dismiss that would be really important for them?
The number one thing they like is to see if they can catch people lying,
Oh, okay.
right?
Yes.
Uh, I'm sorry, the other question was what?
What are they keen to learn, and what do they dismiss that would actually be really important?
I think people really don't like, I'll answer the first question in a minute.
Mhm.
People don't like to watch themselves in the mirror. They don't like to practice like I don't like it, but I've forced myself to do it. That's one thing that's really hard to get people to do.
Mm.
Okay. And the other question I think was around the um
What are they curious to learn?
the lying. Yeah,
Yeah.
now here's the thing about lying. And this is part of what I try to do is break body language myths
Mhm.
because there's a lot of them, okay? And one of the biggest body language myths is that um there are signs, definite signs when somebody's lying. When they look down, they're looking towards hell. When they look up, they're looking towards heaven. When they look to the side, all sorts of nonsense out there that is just not true. And the reality is after 6 decades of Paul Ekman and another guy, Timothy R. Levine, he
Mhm.
wrote a book called Duped.
Mhm.
These guys have turned lying on its head such that we are very, very poor lie detectors, but some of us are really good liars. It's a dangerous combination. And you will never get anywhere in life trying to figure out who's lying to you every minute because you're exposed to several hundred lies per day, right? Well, what do you mean? That's a lot of lying. Well, yeah, sure. You go to the grocery store and the clerk asks you how you are, and you say, I'm fine. Well, you're not fine. You're not feeling well. You don't want to be there, right? You just lied.
Yes, I
All
know.
right. So it's very difficult to determine when someone is lying. However, it's very easy or
Mhm.
easier to determine when somebody is uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, the same things that make you look uncomfortable also make you look like you're a liar.
Mm.
And people have
Yes.
gone to jail because of that.
Yes. Yeah, that's
So
true.
I spend a great deal of time debunking the myth that you're going to walk around tracking liars.
Yeah, because that's not how it works.
No, no.
Yeah.
In fact, I can be fairly gullible myself. Why? Because in some of the latest deception theory, we are hardwired to trust. We want to trust. It is socially beneficial for all of us to trust each other. So we're born to give the benefit of the doubt.
Yes, that's true. And maybe this links nicely into the last question I had, which is if you could give a gift to this next generation, next generation of leaders, next generation of parents, next generation of, I don't know, important people for the next generation, what would it be?
Body language. It's just, to me, it's time has come for not only social scientists and body language experts and our intelligence agencies and the police and all the military, all the other people that engage in this type of nonverbal intelligence. Time for the business people to get a clue about how they look delivering a message. And are other people picking up what they're throwing down, right? And why professions like human resources isn't teaching body language is mind-boggling to me, because you hire someone,
Mhm.
and if you don't see the early warning signs, you end up hiring somebody that is not fit for the job, way in over their head, and oftentimes toxic.
Mm-mm-mm.
The
Yeah.
cost to fix that is 30% of their salary. Imagine if you could weed those people out, right?
Yes.
Um, but leading teams,
Mm.
executives,
Mm.
is your team really, really with you, or are they showing signs that they really don't like what you're saying? Wouldn't you like to know that instead of guessing?
It's very useful.
And and for the people who don't believe in this, this is not pseudoscience. This is not like NLP. NLP is pseudoscience. They have not done repeatable studies on that yet that I've seen. This is not the case with body language. It is science, and it's good science. And it can help make somebody appear more believable, more confident, more accepting, more likable.
Mhm. Yes,
Right.
definitely. And just like, again, because you're explaining it the way you're just saying it, where do you see AI in this whole discussion that we just had?
Right where it is with me now, backing me up. Um, the chapter 7 of the book is called on venturousness, and that word is means kind of being adventurous, but with a particular goal and use in sight, not just for fun and enjoyment, right? And that's what we did at Merrill. We incorporated body language into uh, qualitative research, and then we added another layer of quality and accuracy on top of that by having me backed up by an AI algorithm that's trained to find the same micro expressions that I am. It's like wearing a belt and suspenders to hold your pants up. And we're the first company to do that with somebody like me using AI. And we're doing it regularly. Clients were gobsmacked when they saw the results of respondents who said one thing, but were showing signs of another.
Hmm.
So it's very powerful. It's very accurate. And, people are concerned that AI is going to replace them. I don't think that's going to happen, not in my lifetime anyway. But what I do see is a human intelligence, and that would be human and artificial intelligence. And that's what we strive for in the book. I mean, would you rather be talking to me or some silicon robot?
Of course, to you.
I think you would, some people would say a robot. I get that. But, would you rather be interviewed by a robot when you're, applying for a job, or I mean, it's what it's getting to.
Yeah.
And it's woefully inadequate. So that's my story, Sandra, and I'm sticking to it.
Great. Amazing. It sounds amazing. I wish you continuing growth with selling the book and finding new and interesting partners to work with your companies and everybody that you trained to continue the path of what you've given them from your expertise. So it sounds really exciting. And what else can I say? It's enjoyable. From the top of my head, I'm sure there'll be 25 more questions, but let me think about your answers first.
Well, I thank you. This really is a topic that is of a lot of interest to people.
Hmm.
It really is. And it used to be that when I started talking to people, I'd tell them out front what I do. I'm a body language guy. And then they would get all weird on me because they thought I was, reading them. So now I don't say anything, right? But once I tell people what I do, because they'll never guess, um, it's a very interesting topic. and most people get very interested by it, and some of them even want to learn more. So I welcome them, and I thank you for the opportunity to discuss this.
Sure, gladly. Anytime again.
I'm going to turn the